There is a scene that Ray Milland described once in a single interview that he never described again. He was at a party in Los Angeles in 1953. Grace Kelly was across the room. She was 23 years old. He was 47. They had made Dial M for Murder together the previous year, the Hitchcock film in which she played a woman whose husband plots to have her murdered and in which he played the husband. And the making of it had produced something that neither of them had anticipated when the production began, and that neither of them had managed entirely in the way that the professional context in which it happened had required it to be managed. She was across the room at the party. She was, as she always was, the specific person in any room that the room organized itself around, not through the performance of attracting attention, not through the deliberate deployment of the beauty and the manner and the specific quality of presence that she had, but simply by being there, in the way that certain people are simply there, and the room knows it without being told. He saw her across the room. She was talking to someone. She had not yet seen him. He watched her for a period that he described in the single interview as perhaps 30 seconds, and that contained in those 30 seconds the full accumulation of what the year since Dial M for Murder had cost him in the private accounting that he kept and did not share. She looked up. She saw him. She smiled the smile of a woman who is genuinely glad to see someone and who is also, in the gladness, managing the distance between the gladness and the other thing that the gladness exists alongside. He nodded. He smiled back. He excused himself from the conversation he had been in, and he went to the bar, and he got a drink, and he did not go across the room to her. He described this scene once to one journalist in 1973, 20 years after the party. He described it in the oblique way of a man who is describing something that he does not usually describe, and who is doing so on this occasion for reasons that he does not fully articulate in the interview, but that the interview itself, read carefully, suggests have something to do with the accumulation of the 20 years and the specific quality of the thing that the 20 years have not diminished. He said, "I stood at that bar for a long time. I thought about a great many things, and then I went home." The journalist did not follow up. The interview moved to other subjects. The 30 seconds at the party and the time at the bar and the going home were left in the interview as the single, complete, unelaborated account of something that Ray Milland spent the rest of his professional life organizing his public statements around not elaborating on. Tonight, my friend, I want to elaborate on it. Come with me. We are going back to the beginning, to Wales, in the year 1907, to a family that was Welsh in the specific, rooted way of Welsh families in the early 20th century, organized around the community and the chapel, and the specific quality of Welsh identity that is both intensely local and deeply aware of itself as something distinct from the English identity that surrounds it. Reginald Alfred Truscott Jones was born on the 3rd of January, 1907, in Neath, Glamorganshire, Wales. He was the son of Alfred Jones, an engineer, and Elizabeth Truscott Jones, a woman of the specific quality of Welsh female competence and warmth that the Welsh tradition of the early 20th century produced in its women, which is to say that she was capable and warm and organized, and that the household she managed was organized around those qualities. He was, among the children of the family, the one who had the specific combination of physical attractiveness and the quality of ease in front of other people that the subsequent career would use. Though in 1907, and in the years immediately following, there was no reason to expect that the career would be the career it became. He served in the British Army. He served in the Household Cavalry, which is the specific regiment that the Guards Division maintains, and that is organized around the ceremonial duties that the regiment performs, as much as around the combat duties that all military units perform in time of war. He served in the specific years that military service in the early 1920s required of young men in Britain, and the service produced in him the specific qualities that military service in the Household Cavalry produces: the bearing, the self-possession, the quality of physical authority that comes from the specific training of a regiment whose public function is to be seen. He was, in other words, already very good at being looked at before he arrived in Hollywood. He arrived in Hollywood in 1930. He had been in London before that, in the London Theatre, in the small film work that the British film industry of the late 1920s was producing. He had changed his name in the specific act of nominal self-creation that performers of his era, who were building careers in the English-speaking entertainment industry, regularly made. Reginald Alfred Truscott Jones became Ray Milland. The name was the name of his mother's family, or a version of it, and the choosing of it was the choice of a man who understood that the name needed to work in the specific way that names in the entertainment industry need to work, which is to be sayable and rememberable, and to sit on a marquee in a way that serves the commercial purposes of the institution putting it there. He was signed by Paramount Pictures. He appeared in films through the early 1930s in the way of a contract player who is being assessed and developed, present, competent, giving the productions what they needed without yet having found the specific material that would reveal what he was fully capable of. He married Muriel Weber in 1932. She was an American woman. She was the woman who was going to be his wife for the next 52 years, until her death in 1986. She was the woman who was at home while Grace Kelly was across the room at the party in 1953. She was the woman who was at home during the years that Dial M for Murder produced what it produced. She was, across the 52 years of the marriage, the fact of the marriage, the woman whose presence organized the domestic life around which the professional life was built, and that the professional life was, in the conventional account of his story, organized around sustaining. The marriage to Muriel was real. The love in it was genuine. I want to state this clearly because the story I am telling tonight requires the clarity about what was genuine in the marriage before describing what existed alongside what was genuine in the marriage, because the alongside is not the replacement of the genuine but the complication of it, and the complication deserves the honesty that reduces it neither to a simple story of infidelity nor to a simple story of a professional relationship that was mischaracterized as something else. The Lost Weekend came in 1945. Billy Wilder directed it. The film was an adaptation of Charles Jackson's novel about an alcoholic writer's 4-day descent into the specific hell of active addiction, told with a frank quality that the Hollywood of 1945 had not previously brought to the subject of alcoholism, and that the film's commercial and critical success confirmed was what the audience was ready to receive. He played Don Burnham. Don Burnham is a man who is not simply a man who drinks too much in the way that the melodrama of addiction tends to present its protagonists. He is a man of intelligence and literary ambition who is destroyed by the specific relationship between his gifts and the substance that both releases and destroys them. He is a man who understands, with uncomfortable clarity, what the drinking is doing to him and who continues anyway, because the understanding of the damage does not produce the cessation of the behavior that produces the damage, which is the specific, painful, honest truth about addiction that the film is organized around communicating. Ray Milland inhabited Don Burnham with the total commitment of a performer who is giving a role everything that the role requires, and who has, in this specific case, the additional quality of giving it something the role did not specifically require, but that the role, once given it, cannot be imagined without. The specific quality of a man who is performing the deterioration of a person of intelligence, the specific, uncomfortable quality of an intelligent man watching himself deteriorate with the intelligence that cannot stop the deterioration, is something that Ray Milland gave Don Burnham in a way that the performance has not been surpassed in the subsequent 80 years of the cinema's engagement with the subject of addiction. He won the Academy Award for Best Actor. He was 38 years old. It was 1946, the year of the ceremony for the films of 1945. He won against Bing Crosby and Gregory Peck and Gene Kelly and Cornell Wilde, which is the kind of field that makes the winning mean something in addition to the ordinary meaning of winning the Academy Award. The Oscar was received. The career continued. The Paramount contract continued. He was, in the late 1940s, in the specific professional position of an Oscar-winning leading man at a major studio, working, recognized, commercially and critically established in the specific way of performers who have the Oscar and who are in the decade immediately following it, which is the decade in which the Oscar's promise is either redeemed or not redeemed in the form of the sustained recognition that the Oscars seem to herald. And then Grace Kelly walked onto the set of Dial M for Murder. She was 23 years old. She had been in Hollywood for approximately 2 years, having come from Philadelphia and from the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, and from a brief career in modeling and theater. And in those 2 years, she had been in 3 films: 14 Hours in 1951, High Noon in 1952, and Mogambo in 1953, the last of which had produced an Academy Award nomination that the industry was receiving as the first formal acknowledgement of what the camera had been finding in Grace Kelly since the first time the camera found her. What the camera found in Grace Kelly, and what the industry and the audiences were in the process of understanding in 1953, was the specific thing that makes certain performers irreplaceable in the specific form they have. Not beauty alone, because the camera finds beauty in quantity and does not produce from beauty alone the specific response that Grace Kelly produced. Not talent alone, though the talent was genuine and developed. Something that is the combination of those things with something else, that does not have a clean name. The quality of a person who is fully present in the moment the camera is recording, and who gives the camera, from that full presence, access to an interior life that the audience receives as something that concerns them personally, rather than as something they are observing from a safe professional distance. She had this quality. It was visible in every film she made, and it was visible to the people who worked with her in the specific proximity of film production, not only through the camera, but in the ordinary, daily, unmediated experience of being in her presence. Ray Milland was in her presence for the duration of the Dial M for Murder production. He was 46 years old. She was 23. He was married, had been married for 20 years. She was not married and would not be for another 3 years, when she married Prince Rainier of Monaco in April of 1956 and left Hollywood permanently. The Hitchcock production was the specific context in which the relationship developed. Alfred Hitchcock had a specific method of working with his actors and a specific relationship to the performances he needed from them that was both professional and personal, in the way that Hitchcock's relationships with his performers tended to be professional and personal, which is to say that the professional and the personal were not clearly separated, and that the conditions of the production were organized, consciously or not, around the specific emotional states that the roles required. Dial M for Murder required from Ray Milland and Grace Kelly a specific quality of intimate tension, the tension of a marriage that has become a site of danger rather than of safety, in which the husband is the threat and the wife is the target, and the specific quality of the domestic space has been corrupted by the husband's plot. The acting of this requires the performers to inhabit, for the duration of the production, a relationship of the kind that the role describes, the specific physical and emotional proximity of a husband and wife, with the additional layer of the specific emotional content that the plot requires. The inhabiting produced what the inhabiting produced. Not a relationship in the formal sense of the word, not the relationship that the subsequent mythology of their connection has sometimes suggested it was. Something more specific and more complicated than either the professional interaction of two performers in a Hitchcock film or the romantic relationship that the mythology tends toward. Something that was real and that was between them, and that neither of them described fully in public at any point in the subsequent years. He described the 30 seconds at the bar once in 1973. She never described it at all in any context publicly, which is consistent with who Grace Kelly was, but which also means that the account of what the production produced is necessarily partial, in the way of accounts that have only one source. The party was in 1953. The 30 seconds were at the bar. He went home. She went to Monaco in 1956. She became Princess Grace. She left the screen. She left the screen completely, permanently, in the specific way of a woman who had married into a position that did not permit the continuation of the career. And the leaving was the leaving of the most gifted screen actress of her generation, at the point of the fullest expression of her gifts, which is a particular kind of loss for the cinema, and a particular kind of loss for the specific people who had worked with her in the years before the leaving. She died in September of 1982. She was 52 years old. She died in a car accident on the road from Monaco to La Turbie, the same road on which the accident that had happened to her had happened, in the specific way of deaths that have the terrible quality of being connected to the geography of a person's life, in a way that the geography seems to have been building toward. He was 75 years old when she died. He had been alive for 29 years since the party in 1953 and the 30 seconds at the bar. He was, by 1982, in the later stage of a long career that had taken many forms since The Lost Weekend and Dial M for Murder, the genre films of the 1950s and 1960s, the directorial work, The Frogs in 1972, and Love Story in 1970, and the television work of the 1970s and 1980s. He had been working consistently for 50 years, with the professional reliability of a man who had the craft and the commitment and the specific quality of professional seriousness that sustained careers require. He did not make a public statement when she died. He was not the person who made public statements about Grace Kelly, because he had never been the person who made public statements about Grace Kelly, because the public statements would have required the acknowledgement of the specific thing that the public statements of the people who had worked with her did not tend to acknowledge. He gave one interview in 1983, not specifically about her death, though her death was in the room in the way that a recent death is in the room when the person who has died was the person she was. He spoke about the career. He was asked about the films he was most proud of. He mentioned The Lost Weekend. He mentioned some of the directorial work. He was asked about Dial M for Murder. And he said that it was an important film, and that Hitchcock was a genius, and that Grace Kelly was the finest actress he had ever worked with. He said she was the finest actress he had ever worked with, not the most beautiful actress, not the most famous or the most celebrated or the most whatever the adjective is that would have allowed the statement to be understood as the professional compliment that the professional context of the question would have permitted. The finest actress he had ever worked with. In 50 years of a career that included some of the most celebrated collaborations in the history of American cinema. The journalist received the statement as the professional compliment and moved on. The interview continued. Other subjects were addressed. The finest actress he had ever worked with was left in the transcript of the interview as the single, unelaborated, very specific statement of a man who was 76 years old and who was saying, in the specific oblique language that he always used for the things he most directly meant, the thing he most directly meant. He died on March the 10th, 1986. He was 79 years old. Muriel died the same year. In the same year that saw the ending of the 54-year marriage, in the way that long marriages sometimes end when the people in them have been together long enough that the ending of one is not far from the ending of the other. He died in Torrance, California, at Torrance Memorial Medical Center, of congestive heart failure. The career had been running for 55 years. He had been in more than 100 films. He had won the Academy Award. He had directed films. He had written. He had been, across the decades, one of the most consistently excellent professionals in the history of the American entertainment industry. He had stood at a bar for a long time in 1953 and then gone home. Now, my friend, let me tell you what I think the story of Ray Milland and Grace Kelly is actually about. Because I do not think it is primarily about a love affair or primarily about the specific relationship between two performers on a Hitchcock production. I think it is about something that the entertainment industry and the culture it produces are not always good at talking about, which is the specific form of connection that is real and significant, and that does not resolve into the categories that the culture has available for connection. The categories available are professional relationship, romantic relationship, friendship. What Ray Milland had with Grace Kelly, in the available evidence from the single interview in 1973, and the single statement in 1983, and the 30 seconds at the party, and the time at the bar, does not fit cleanly into any of those categories. It fits into something that does not have a clean name, the specific form of recognition that some people experience in the presence of some other people, in which what is recognized is something fundamental about the other person's specific quality of being in the world, and in which the recognition produces an attachment that is not simply professional and not simply romantic, but is organized around the recognition itself. He recognized something in her. The recognition was real, and it was specific, and it produced an attachment that the years did not dissolve. Not a dissolving romantic attachment, not the thing that dissolves over years because the person who was the object of it is no longer present, and the person who was attached has moved on to other attachments, and the original attachment has been replaced. The kind of attachment that does not dissolve because it is organized around the recognition. and the recognition is not the kind of thing that the passage of time undoes. She died in 1982. He said she was the finest actress he had ever worked with in 1983. He died in 1986. The 3 years between her death and his death are the 3 years in which a man of 79, who has been carrying the recognition for 30 years, is carrying it in the specific condition of a man who knows now that the person recognized is gone. Not that she was going to go someday, that she had gone. The specific difference between the anticipatory knowledge of mortality and the concrete fact of the death. He carried it. He had been carrying it since the party in 1953. He carried it through the subsequent years of the career, and through the death of Muriel, and through the 3 years between her death and his. And the carrying of it is the thing that the interview in 1973 and the statement in 1983 and the 30 seconds at the bar are the evidence of. It broke him. Not in the dramatic sense of the word, not the breaking of a man who is destroyed by the thing that breaks him, who is rendered non-functional by the weight of the break. In the specific, quieter sense of the word that describes the change in a person that the carrying of something real and significant across 30 years produces. The change that means the person who is carrying it at the end of the 30 years is not quite the same person who began the carrying at the beginning. That something in the interior architecture has been shaped by the specific pressure of the thing that was carried. He was not destroyed. He continued. The career continued. The marriage to Muriel continued. The life continued. But something had been shaped by the carrying, and the something was not nothing. And the 30 seconds at the bar in 1953, and the statement in 1983 and the going home are the places where the something is most visible. She was the finest actress he had ever worked with. He carried that for 30 years. The carrying broke him in the specific way that the carrying of real things across real time breaks the people who carry them. Not destroyed, broken. The specific difference between those two things is the difference that his story contains. Sleep well, my friend. And the next time you see Dial M for murder, the husband and the wife, the plot and the danger, the specific quality of intimate tension that Hitchcock built into every frame. Watch what Ray Milland does when he is in a scene with Grace Kelly. Watch what he does when he looks at her. You are watching a man who is carrying the recognition. He carried it for 30 years. He never put it down.